In a dimly lit and stuffy classroom at the University of California, Berkeley, Professor Dr. Edward Mason raised a complex equation on the blackboard, his eyes gleaming with thinly veiled contempt. "Miss Anna, you, the scholarship kid from the projects, think you can solve this? It's impossible for ordinary minds like yours." The class laughed nervously, but Anna, a 20-year-old black woman with piercing eyes, just tilted her head, an enigmatic smile appearing on her lips. What no one knew was that this equation wasn't just a challenge, it was the key to a dark secret that could destroy lives. Anna Thompson had arrived at the university like a walking miracle. Coming from the tough streets of Oakland's inner city, she had earned a full scholarship with perfect grades, but she always stayed in the shadows, avoiding curious stares. Professor Mason, a middle-aged man with a reputation as a ruthless genius, saw her only as an intruder, someone who didn't belong in the academic elite. A subtle tension hung in the air, rumors of old disappearances in the math department, and Anna seemed to carry an invisible burden, as if she knew more than she let on. Night fell over the campus, and elongated shadows danced on the walls, whispering unspoken secrets. The following days dragged like a heavy fog over the UC Berkeley campus. Anna Thompson barely slept. In her cramped dorm room, lit only by the cold glow of her laptop, she spent hours staring at the equation Professor Mason had scrawled on the board with such disdain. At first glance, it was just a tangle of complex symbols, double integrals, elliptic functions, infinite series that seemed to defy known mathematical laws. But the deeper Anna dove, the more she felt something didn't fit. At first, it was subtle details. A coefficient that repeated in a strange way. An exponent that formed a too familiar numerical sequence. She started jotting everything down in an old notebook, drawing lines between terms like connecting dots on a hidden map. Gradually, the numbers began to whisper. They seemed to form patterns that didn't belong to pure mathematics. It was as if the equation was a disguised door, and Anna was slowly turning the handle. Meanwhile, the campus seemed to conspire against her. Every time she crossed the tree-lined quad between the old buildings of the Math Institute, she felt a chill on the back of her neck. A man in a dark hat and long coat was always there, leaning against a tree or sitting on a bench, pretending to read a newspaper. He never approached, but he never fully disappeared either. Anna quickened her pace, her heart pounding, the sound of her own sneakers echoing too loudly on the stone path. On Wednesday night, returning from the library, she found a note slipped under her dorm door. Plain paper, letters cut from magazines like in old movies, "Stop while you can. You don't know what you're dealing with." Fear came fast and cold, but it quickly turned to anger. Whoever it was, they were underestimating her, just like Mason had in class. The professor, for his part, wasn't calm. Anna noticed. In the hallways, he watched her from afar, eyes narrowed, his sarcastic smile now more forced. During lectures, when she raised her hand to ask something seemingly innocent about the equation, Mason answered too quickly, cutting her off, changing the subject. Once, passing him in the hall, Anna overheard him speaking softly on the phone, "She's getting too close. We need to handle this." He hung up as soon as he sensed her presence. In the library, among dusty shelves of old books, Anna found the first concrete clue. A yellowed article from 1998, almost hidden at the bottom of a stack. Brilliant mathematician from Oakland projects disappears after academic controversy. The researcher's name, John Thompson. The same last name. The blurry photo showed a young man, smiling, with the same piercing eyes as Anna. The text mentioned a revolutionary formula he had developed, and that was never published after his disappearance. Mason's equation used identical elements. The tension built like a rising tide. Anna felt the noose tightening. The man in the dark hat now appeared even near the dorm. Anonymous messages on her phone. Random numbers that, when decoded, formed dates. Dates of death. The air felt heavier, the night's silence more threatening. She knew she was on the right path, but also that each step brought her closer to an abyss. And the worst part, the closer she got to the truth, the more she realized the equation wasn't just an academic challenge. It was a trap. Or perhaps, a message. From someone who had fallen into it before her. What Anna couldn't yet imagine was how personal it would all become. The discovery in the library hit like a knife to the chest. Anna held the yellowed newspaper article between trembling fingers, the blurry photo of John Thompson staring directly at her. The eyes were the same, deep, intelligent, full of a quiet determination she had inherited without knowing. Her father, missing since she was 7 years old. Memories came in painful flashes, her mother sitting at the kitchen table in their small apartment in Oakland, crying silently while the police shrugged and said, "Men sometimes just walk away." Neighbors whispering that John got mixed up with powerful people. Anna had always felt, deep in her soul, that it was a lie. And now, here was the proof. A brilliant mathematician from the projects, creator of a revolutionary algorithm, vanished after an academic controversy with a professor at UC Berkeley. That same night, back in her cramped dorm room, Anna opened her laptop with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Mason's equation was no longer just a challenge. It was a bridge to the past. She began working with silent fury, applying cryptography techniques she'd learned alone, late at night, on hidden internet forums while her mother slept. Hours passed. The campus outside sank into silence, broken only by the distant sound of cars on Telegraph Avenue. At 7 in the morning, with the sun rising red over the San Francisco Bay, the first layer cracked open. Hidden among the variables and coefficients, a numerical sequence that, converted to ASCII code, formed a short and devastating phrase. "He stole my work. Find the proof." Anna felt the air leave her lungs. Mason hadn't created that equation just to humiliate her. He'd created it to test someone. Or perhaps to lure someone who already knew too much. The room seemed to spin. She needed help, and she needed it now. That's how she turned to Luke. The only friend she'd made at the university was a skinny, pale guy with thick glasses who spent more time in the computer lab than in any class. Luke was known for hacking systems, just to see if he could, and had a reputation as a troubled genius. Anna knocked on his door at 8 in the morning, eyes red from exhaustion, hair tied in a messy bun. She showed him the article, the decoded phrase, her notes. Luke read it all in silence, his face growing paler. "Dude, this is serious. If Mason's involved in a disappearance, we're talking murder. Are you absolutely sure you want to keep going?" Anna stared at him with an intensity that made Luke step back. "I've waited 16 years for this. With or without you." Luke adjusted his glasses, took a deep breath, and opened his laptop. "Fine, but we're doing this right. No amateur stuff, or we'll end up as statistics." In the weeks that followed, Anna's life became a double-faced nightmare. By day, she kept up the mask, attended classes, sat in the back, gave short and correct answers when called on, pretended to struggle with simple subjects to avoid attention. But at night, alongside Luke in the empty lab, she dove deeper. The equation had multiple layers, like a poisoned onion. Each partial solution revealed a new clue: GPS coordinates leading to an abandoned building in downtown Oakland, offshore bank account numbers in tax havens, fragments of old emails exchanged between Mason and a contact identified only as Raven. The threats started small and grew like a dark tide. In the first week, Anna returned from the cafeteria to find her room ransacked, drawers open, clothes on the floor, laptop upside down. Nothing stolen, just a clear message: "We're watching." In the second week, the flash drive with all her notes vanished from her backpack between classes. She swore she'd left it in the side pocket. Luke installed tiny cameras in the dorm hallway. In the nighttime footage, the man in the dark had appeared. Tall, thin, precise movements, picking the lock with a professional tool in under 30 seconds. One rainy night, after a marathon session in the lab, Anna and Luke were followed. They left campus through the side gate, cutting through alleys near Telegraph. A black car with no plates tailed them slowly, low beams on, engine purring like a predator. When they sped up, the car flashed its high beams and pulled up to the curb. They ran, jumping low walls, hiding in a crowded bar with live music until the car vanished in the rain. That night, Anna didn't sleep. She sat on her bed, a kitchen knife beside her, listening to every creak in the old building, every footstep in the hall. Mason, meanwhile, was crumbling bit by bit. In class, the glances he threw at Anna lingered too long. Once, handing back a graded exam, he leaned in and whispered so only she could hear. "You're being reckless, Miss Thompson. Stop before it's too late." Anna held his gaze, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Reckless as building a career on an innocent man's blood, Professor." He blinked, his face draining of color for a moment, before composing himself and moving on as if nothing had happened. The clues piled up like pieces of a macabre puzzle. Following one of the coordinates, Anna and Luke broke into a locked basement in a condemned building on Broadway. Luke bypassed the electronic lock with a homemade device. Inside, dusty boxes full of old floppy disks, handwritten notes recognizably from Anna's father, and a thick folder titled, Project Eagle, Confidential Intellectual Property. It was the original algorithm, a revolutionary data compression and encryption system that, updated, would be worth billions today. And there was a letter, handwritten by John Thompson. If you're reading this, it's because I failed. Mason wants it all for himself. He's already threatened my family. Don't trust anyone at the university. Take this to the police. And please, find my daughter. Tell her daddy loves her more than anything in the world. Anna cried there, in the cold and damp basement, for the first time since her mother's funeral. Luke stood silent, respecting the moment. But the danger was closer than they thought. Days later, Luke received an anonymous email with a video attachment, Anna sleeping in her room, filmed from an impossible angle, from inside the dorm, right above the bed. The message was short, final warning. The tension was now palpable, electric. Every step brought them closer to the truth, but also to the abyss. Anna carried years of grief, anger, and fierce determination knotted tightly in her chest. Luke, once so confident, now glanced over his shoulder at every corner, fingers nervously tapping the keyboard. All that remained was the final layer of the equation, the one that, according to her father's clues, contained irrefutable proof of the crime, a digitized recording of Mason admitting the theft and threats, hidden as mathematical noise within the formula itself. The net was closing, and Mason, cornered like a wounded animal, was about to bare his claws. The night of the confrontation arrived like distant thunder that suddenly explodes overhead. Anna was alone in the Math Institute's computer lab at 2:30 a.m. Luke had stayed home, knocked out by a bad flu worsened by the stress of recent days. The entire campus seemed deserted, only the low hum of computers and the distant tick-tock of a broken clock broke the silence. Her laptop screen illuminated her face with cold light as she typed the final adjustments to solve the equation's last layer. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, driven by a mix of exhaustion, anger, and hope. Suddenly, the algorithm unlocked. Like a poisonous flower blooming in the dark, the final layer revealed an embedded audio file, camouflaged as mathematical noise in the coefficients. Anna clicked play with her heart in her throat. First came her father's voice, a voice she hadn't heard in 16 years but recognized instantly. Tired, hoarse but steady. If you're hearing this, it's because I'm no longer here to tell it in person. My name is John Thompson. This is my final confession, recorded on March 12, 1998. Today I scheduled a meeting with Professor Edward Mason in his office. He wants the entire Project Eagle for himself. He's offered money, he's threatened me. I've refused everything. I'm going to record what happens. If anything happens to me, please, find my daughter, Anna. Tell her daddy loves her more than anything in this world. That she was the light of my life. Then the audio shifted to the recording of the meeting itself. Mason's voice, younger but unmistakably arrogant. John, you're being stubborn. This algorithm is too big for someone like you. I can publish it, I have connections, I can take it to the world. Give me the full code and I'll list you as co-author. Everybody wins. Her father's response, calm but full of contempt. You mean list my name in small print while yours is bold on the cover? No, Edward. This work is mine. I built it from scratch, on nights when my daughter slept in my lap. I'm not handing it over for you to steal. A pause. The sound of a chair scraping. Mason, now more aggressive. You don't understand what's at stake. There are people interested in this. People who don't take no for an answer. If you don't hand it over, your family will suffer. John, firm. Then do what you have to do. But I won't give it up. There was the sound of a struggle, something falling, a muffled grunt, a short cry. Then, absolute silence. Anna stopped the audio. Hot tears streamed down her face, dripping onto the keyboard. The lab seemed to spin around her. Everything she'd imagined for years, her father betrayed, robbed, perhaps murdered, was there, in digital sound waves. She saved the file to 3 different flash drives, sent it via encrypted email to Luke, a trusted journalist, and a cybercrimes unit. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the laptop. That's when the lab door creaked open slowly. Anna whipped around. Edward Mason stood there, in the hallway's dim light, holding a master key that dangled lightly in his hand. His face was pale as melted wax, eyes bloodshot, normally impeccable hair now disheveled. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in days. "You shouldn't have gotten this far, Anna," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. She stood slowly, body on full alert, but anger outweighing fear. "You killed my father." Mason stepped forward, closing the door behind him with a soft click. The sound echoed like a verdict. Anna raised her phone, showing the screen with the email send confirmations. "It's over, Professor. The recording is already with the police. With journalists. With everyone who matters. You'll pay for everything." She expected rage, denial, that he'd try to smash the laptop, maybe even attack her. But Mason did something completely unexpected. He dropped to his knees. Not theatrically begging forgiveness, like someone finally letting go of a weight carried for nearly 2 decades. His hands covered his face, shoulders shaking. "I didn't kill him, Anna," he said, voice choked. "I stole, yes. Threatened, yes. I was cowardly, ambitious, cruel. But I didn't kill him." Anna froze, phone still raised like a weapon. "Then who did? Who finished what you started?" Mason lifted his face. Real tears streamed down his cheeks. He looked small, broken. "When I left that office, furious because he'd refused again, I slammed the door and walked away. I swore I'd ruin his career another way. But someone was already waiting. Someone who wanted the algorithm for far worse than academic vanity. A tech company that, back then, supplied surveillance systems to governments. They'd approached me months earlier, offering money to deliver the project. I refused, but I told them who had the original code." He took a deep breath, as if each word physically hurt. "They killed John to get the disks. Then blackmailed me with proof of my involvement. All these years, I publish papers based on his work, I win awards, I build a career, and they get a silent cut. The man in the hat who's been following you. He works for them. I knew you were getting close. That's why I humiliated you in class. Because I knew if you were really John's daughter, you'd be brilliant enough to solve the equation." Anna felt the ground vanish beneath her. "You built the equation as a trap for me." Mason shook his head slowly. "Not a trap, a testament. I built it years ago, with all the layers you found. It was my cowardly way of, one day, if someone smart enough came along, handing the truth to them. I wanted you to hate me enough to destroy me. Because I deserve to be destroyed. I carry this guilt every day. I wanted it to end." The silence that followed was so thick it seemed to choke the air. Anna didn't know what to feel. Anger, confusion, pity, betrayal, all swirled in a whirlwind. The man before her was no longer the arrogant monster from class. He was a broken human being, ruined by his own past. "So the real killer is still out there," she said, voice steady despite the tears. "And they know I have the proof." Mason nodded, standing slowly. "Yes. And now they'll come after you. After both of us. I have names, dates, bank accounts I can hand over. If we work together, maybe we can end this once and for all." Anna looked at him for a long moment. The hatred still burned, but now there was something more, a chance for full justice. Not just revenge against the thief, but against those truly responsible for her father's death. She extended her hand, not to forgive, but to seal an unlikely pact. "Then let's end them. Together." In that moment, the story shifted completely. It stopped being a solitary journey of vengeance and became a fragile alliance between the victim's daughter and the man who had indirectly caused her pain. The real enemy was still in the shadows, and the man in the hat was just the tip of the iceberg. The impossible equation wasn't just a message from the past. It was the start of a hunt that was only beginning. The following weeks were a race against time, a dangerous dance between shadows and light. Anna and Mason, bound by a fragile pact forged in the lab's dead of night, began working together. It wasn't trust, it was necessity. Mason handed over everything he'd kept for nearly 2 decades. Contact names, Cayman Islands bank account numbers, encrypted emails, recordings of secret meetings with representatives of the company that ordered John Thompson's death. The company was called Nexum Surveillance Inc., a multinational tech firm that, in the 90s, supplied listening and monitoring systems to authoritarian governments in Latin America. John's algorithm, Project Eagle, was the missing piece to make their systems unbreakable. Luke, recovered, jumped back in full force. The three formed an unlikely trio: the young prodigy from the projects, the repentant professor, and the university hacker. They met at night in the lab or in a small apartment Mason rented in downtown Berkeley, far from campus. There, they built the plan. First, they solidified the evidence. Mason had a home safe with original documents, signed contracts, bank transfer receipts linking his name to Nexum. Anna scanned everything, created copies on encrypted servers worldwide. Luke hacked the company's internal systems, not to steal, but to plant false trails, making the man in the hat think they were still in the dark. The next step was to lure the enemy onto their turf. Mason set up a fake meeting with his old Nexum contact, using an email he hadn't touched in years. He said he had an updated version of Eagle, and wanted to negotiate an end to the blackmail. The reply came fast: immediate acceptance. Suggested location: an abandoned warehouse in the port of Oakland, at midnight, on a rainy Friday in November. Anna insisted on going. Mason tried to talk her out of it. "It's too dangerous. You already have everything you need to destroy me and expose them." She replied, eyes blazing. "I don't just want to destroy. I want to see their faces when they realize they've lost." Luke installed tiny cameras in the warehouse days ahead. The police, a honest detective from the Oakland PD's Major Crimes Unit whom Anna had contacted anonymously, were alerted, with clear instructions: intervene only after confessions were recorded. The night arrived cold and damp. The port smelled of salt, rust, and diesel. Mason entered first, alone, carrying a fake folder. Anna and Luke watched from a nearby container via a portable monitor. The man in the hat arrived with two armed guards and a gray-haired executive, the CEO of Nexum's U.S. operations, a man named Victor Sanders. The conversation started tense. Mason handed over the folder, saying it contained the final working version of Eagle, improved by him. Sanders opened it, saw printed fake code, and frowned. "This a joke?" Mason smiled for the first time in weeks, a bitter but genuine smile. "No. It's the end." At that moment, the warehouse lights flipped on. Armed police emerged from all sides. Anna entered through the side door, face lit by the rain dripping from her hair. Sanders tried to run but was tackled. The man in the hat, whose real name was retired Detective Alan Grant, drew a gun but hesitated when he saw Anna pointing her phone at him, live streaming to an investigative news channel. "You killed my father," she said, voice like steel. "On these men's orders. Today you pay." Confessions came quickly under the weight of irrefutable evidence Mason had given the detective. Sanders tried to bargain, offer money, but it was too late. Everything was recorded. The scandal exploded the next morning. Headlines in newspapers, TV segments, social media ablaze. Oakland student exposes billion-dollar surveillance scheme and solves 1998 murder. Days later, in the Math Institute's Grand Lecture Hall, packed auditorium. The dean, visibly uncomfortable, announced Edward Mason's immediate dismissal, but also posthumous recognition of John Thompson as the true creator of the algorithm that revolutionized modern cryptography. A plaque with his name would be installed in the main hall. Anna was called to the stage. She walked up without hesitation. Dressed simply, hair tied back, eyes shining with held-back tears. She didn't speak of revenge. She spoke of her father. John Thompson wasn't just a mathematician. He was a dad who worked until dawn to give his daughter a better future. He was a man from Oakland who believed knowledge has no social class. He died for that. But today, he wins. The audience gave a standing ovation. Mason, seated in the back row with an ankle monitor awaiting trial, lowered his head, crying silently. Anna received offers from universities worldwide, full scholarships, speaking invitations. But she chose to stay at UC Berkeley, finishing her degree and creating a scholarship program for students from underprivileged communities. Luke became her partner in an ethical cryptography lab. Mason, in the trial, cooperated fully and received a reduced sentence for his testimony. He'd spend years in prison, but for the first time, he slept without nightmares. Months later, on a sunny afternoon, Anna visited her mother's grave in a local cemetery. She brought flowers and a copy of the paper she'd published with her father's full algorithm, now in the public domain. "We did it, Dad," she whispered to the wind. "You're home." The UC Berkeley campus, once heavy with shadows, now felt lighter. Students walked under the trees, laughing, studying. The plaque with John Thompson's name gleamed in the hall, reminding everyone that talent doesn't ask where you're from. And Anna, walking the corridors that once intimidated her, knew the impossible equation had been solved, not just on the blackboard but in life. In the end, underestimating someone can unearth ghosts you created yourself. Be careful, the genius often hides in the most unlikely shadows.